the Zingo TV app on the app stores of iOS and Android. When you download, please make sure to rate, leave a comment on both. The apps are free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and also all smart TVs 2016 and forward. So my name is Scott Churchson. Like I said, welcome to the Sports Den, where a bunch of guys get together, rant, rave, complain, argue, and sometimes even compliment each other when it comes to the world of sports. Alongside me is, as always, Mr. Obie Schottenfeld. How are you, sir?
I'm fantastic. How are you today, Scott?
And no complaints, no complaints. Joining us also is the president, CEO, and supreme overlord of Spanglish Sports World and Spanglish World Network. So we have to be really nice to him and love his team, the Buffalo Sabres, Mr. Eduardo Harari. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much, Scott, for having me.
Thank you, sir. And joining us in this case, because he's got a breaking story that I think we are all going to be very interested in, we have Mr. Justin Levine, who in this case has his own show, which please talk about that one in a second. But what do you got, sir? Talk to us.
Hey, Scott, thanks for having me. So the National Women's Hockey League has announced their return to play plans for their championship weekend at the end of March. That's March 26 and 27. Super excited to see it get underway after about a month off or so due to COVID-19. That'll include Boston, Minnesota, Connecticut, and Toronto. Toronto has the #1 seed in this case. And I mean, they're going for the Isabel Cup. I'm doing some work for them. So getting to follow on this path as such has been a really incredible experience. And, you know, they're led by a legend. They've got a stacked roster. They may or may not be without a few players, still kind of to be determined based on where Ontario is at and how that works for work restrictions and such. But nonetheless, a really exciting weekend at Warrior Ice Arena, the practice home of the Boston Bruins. And again, that's at the end of March. So a really great announcement coming yesterday on International Women's Day as far as pushing the women's game forward. And it's on NBCSN, both the Friday and Saturday.
Awesome. So in this particular case, now that they're restarting, what changes are being done pre-COVID, pre-COVID shutdown and versus now?
So they were doing testing every 3 days, I believe it was, from my understanding, in Lake Placid when I was covering before I started working for them. And now they're doing testing every day, which is just the days again, Friday and Saturday, just to ensure that, you know, their COVID cannot get into this at all. And it's 2 days, so you wouldn't think that it would. It's 3 games, 2 semifinals and 1 final. And whereas they said that teams were not allowed between the hotel and the arena in Lake Placid, that was it. There were teams who were hitting the streets and posting to social media. And so obviously one of the more strict measures that they're taking is to ensure that that is not happening at all. The team doing that was the Buffalo Beauts, but they are not part of this championship weekend. So I think there's less concern, but obviously there's still going to be heightened measures to ensure that there are, you know, there's nothing falling through the cracks to ensure that they get this weekend done and hand out the cup. And what's funny about this is, I said this yesterday on Facebook, is that the Isabel Cup was not handed out last year. They played every game except the Isabel Cup final, which was supposed to be at Warrior Ice Arena between Boston and Minnesota. So it's funny how, in the weirdest of ways, something so challenging brought us back to that same location to hand out the cup, where Boston and Minnesota are both playing. Boston in the #4 seed, Minnesota the #2 seed. So it's going to be Toronto and Boston and Minnesota and Connecticut. So it's funny how things fall into place in the strangest of ways, and especially during this COVID-19 pandemic that's presented a challenge to all of us. Just funny how that worked out.
And yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up pretty well, where when you're talking about the fact that, you know, this challenging time that is COVID, but yeah, the fact that it did sort of fall a little bit, you know, kind of full circle in some ways. Unfortunately, what you talked about with, you know, players being out on the street, that is not specifically a women's hockey issue. That is just, frankly, a sports issue. You know, MLB had a major problem with that with Zach Quisenberry and a couple of players from Cleveland Indians last year. So unfortunately, you're seeing a lot of cases of players not taking the proper responsibility that they should. I think, you know, props to the NHL last year, not so much this year as a Devils fan, but the NBA was great with that. It's good to see women's hockey is being able to, you know, restart again, you know, being very careful, being very, very strict on the rules and the regulations of it. So in this particular case, any thoughts, any predictions about what's going to happen? I'm not holding you to any predictions here. You know, if you get them wrong, I'm cool with that. But do you have any thoughts about who's going to take it, what the results are going to be? You know, give us your opinion.
My instinct tells me that we're going to end up seeing Toronto and Minnesota. Again, Toronto may or may not be without a few players yet to be determined. And if that is the case, they are losing out on a chippy defenseman and an all-star forward if that happens. Again, not confirmed yet. So either way, I'd like to say it's going to be Toronto, Minnesota. And the last they played, Toronto went up on them 5-0, and then Minnesota came all the way back in overtime and won 6-5. So I think that could be a really interesting battle for the Cup. And I'd like to say Toronto, but again, Minnesota, they've already won one Isabel Cup as the league's first expansion team, and they could very well do it again. So one of those two teams.
But you're still Toronto loyal.
You could say that.
Okay. Yeah, you could say that. He's not going to come out fully with it. Cool. Any other thoughts? Any other, ideas? Anything you wanted to cover? And also, please tell us about your show too while you're at it.
Yeah, I'll start with the shows because that's the easy part. I haven't been actually done many shows in a little while, but I do have a show called Six and Sticks focused on the Toronto Six Hockey Club.
Nice.
And that was following their path to their season. And I think I stopped like right when their season started. And then in addition to that, I have a show called the NWHL Cool Down, and that is just focused on everything league focus based, covers a whole lot of different things within that. And then the OHL Experience I still host as well. And that's just talking with players, especially in this case. It's been really interesting. I've talked with a lot of players the last little while who are predominantly overseas just to get ice time because the Ontario Hockey League is at this point not playing due to many COVID-19 restrictions. And I've heard a lot of different things, but there's been no movement as a result of it. And then with that, God, I don't know. I host so many shows. Those are, I know I'm missing one that I can't think of. Oh, PWHP Over the Glass. So that's the other side of professional women's hockey. And that was also interviewing their players and talking about the investment that's allowed them to have a season where they've already played at the United Center, home of the Blackhawks, and Madison Square Garden, home of the Rangers, to do what they believe is the right thing to market their product for a real sustainable professional women's league. So just a couple of things that I've worked on and am continuing to put to work next little bit.
Awesome. So yeah, basically, if you're not reporting on it, you're definitely living it in some capacity or another. So kudos to you, man. Like I mentioned, basically to you, what part of our show is going to be today is we're covering, for starters, in light of the fact that yesterday was International Women's Day, in our opinion, the top 5 most badass women in sports history. Obie and I have our own lists in this case. You are more than welcome to hang out, give your thoughts. If you got to do something else, that's cool. Whatever you want to do, you just let us know. We're going to run with that. Also, we're going to be talking at length about the Dak contract because Lord knows I got some opinions in that arena as well. So let's start this off. We have our top 5 list of who we feel are the most influential, badass, if you will, women in sports history. Obie, do you want to start off or do you want me to?
I'm going to start off. And as usual, Scott gives me an assignment and I can't follow the directions. So I don't know if mine are the top 5 because I did a couple of things. Most importantly, I refused to double up on sport.
Respect.
I think, unfortunately for me, my focus on women's sports is too narrow. So it would have meant a lot of particular sports. So I had to make sure I got out of that zone and did some research. Second, I didn't rank them because I listed them in alphabetical order by maiden name because just ranking them, I think, is a claim of information that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked 5 that interested me. We're in different sports. Definitely are in the top 50. I guarantee you that. Probably in the top 20. But there were some exceptions. So if you'd like me to kick off with my first one, I absolutely be very happy to.
Please, sir.
So number 1, which was an easier one to pick, it's Simone Biles.
Mm-hmm.
She's got 30 Olympic and World Championship medals in gymnastics. The most world medals at 25 ever, most world golds at 19, held the Olympic title and the world title simultaneously, the first time a woman's done that since 1996. On top of that, and probably the most important reason why she's on the list, is there are 3 named elements named after her in the women's event. There's the Biles on the beam, the Biles on the vault, and the Biles 2 on the floor. And each one of them is the most difficult element on each one of those apparatus. And she's the only person to ever complete them. So if that's not what badass is, I really don't know.
You know what? I give it to you on that one. Absolutely. That is part of my list, so there's probably not going to be too much I may cover in there. I did have a couple honorary mentions, so maybe I'll move them up. Just trying to keep a little diversity here. As always, you can find us on Twitter at SSW Sports Den or on Facebook at Spangler Sports Den. Eduardo, you said you have your list as well, so if you want to start off with yours, then I'll go to my first one as well after that.
Okay, so my first one, I will be Katrina Witt. Katrina Witt, as everybody knows, world-renowned as figure skater, probably one of the most dominating forces in women's skate in her decade, and I cannot see anybody else in that era that made more of a splash in women's sport.
Nice. Okay. In my particular case, now the list that I have is not in any specific order in general. I kind of went with more mainstream initially, and then kind of went a little bit more into the obscure arena. Just try and keep it interesting that way. First one for me, probably not much of a surprise to you. I went with Martina Navratilova. She came out as a lesbian in 1981. In my case, growing up alongside my next door neighbor, we used to actually play street tennis, growing up in the neighborhood we did. So I would play as John McEnroe. She would always play as Martina Navratilova, because Martina Navratilova went 747 to 143, an 87% win percentage. She had 177 titles, and ironically enough, was also on Dancing with the Stars once. So in this case, growing up as an 80s kid, there were certain names in tennis that everybody knew. Martina Navratilova absolutely was one of them. In this case, like I said, from a tennis standpoint, John McEnroe was on my side of it, arguably one of the bad boys of tennis. But Martina Navratilova was always at the top of her game. It was always typically, on women's side, her and like Chris Evert Lloyd. And in this case, she was really kind of an inspiration to a lot of women in a lot of different ways. And frankly, like I said, her win percentage was just obscene. So that was my number one. If you want, what I'll do just for kicks is I'll go to my number two, just because of the fact, I guess we'll just flip it back and forth. Justin, if you got any thoughts, I know this is not something that you would initially basically signed on for. Give an opinion if you got one. Feel free to interrupt. I am 1,000% fine, but I don't want to put you on the spot at all, because this was not what you came on for. So out of respect, I don't want you to worry that you got to come up with something quick. So.
No, I've got a few that I would put on the list. Again, mostly hockey based, because I've been following the national women's teams for the most part, US and Canada. So I would say Haley Wickenheiser falls on that list. Danielle Goyette, Kim St. Pierre, Charlene Labonte. Number 5. I'll think on number 5, but I think those are 4 of the most predominant, and they're all Canadians.
I have one that actually is going to would probably be on your list too, but we'll get to that in due time. Okay, so my more or less number 2 in this particular case, I did put Serena Williams on here. Serena Williams in this particular case, 23 career titles, sure, but she was Associated Press's Female Athlete of the Decade last decade. Tennis.com called her the world's greatest tennis player in the open era, but also battled multiple pulmonary embolisms, postpartum depression, DVT. She had a lot of personal issues that she had to work with, especially when giving birth to her daughter. But she, in spite of that, came back anyway, recovered, still won titles anyway. And I found that part to be really, really impressive, because if you've ever had DVT, if you've ever battled things like that, that kills you. Because that basically those little blood clots can break off, land into your lungs, land into an internal organ, and frankly, just kill you. I dated a girl a bunch of years ago that almost died from that. So I remember firsthand what that was dealing with. So it's one of those things that, like I said, it's perseverance that caused her, in my mind, to be on this list. Her, and obviously her rivalry with her sister, was phenomenal. I mean, it was great to watch those two. And there are certain people, I think, in sports, and I think we've talked about this before, where in some ways I'm not going to say take them for granted, but you don't appreciate them fully until they retire. We've talked about that with, for example, Michael Jordan. We talk about that with Derek Jeter. You talk about that with these players that when they're in their prime, you just assume they're there, but eventually they're going to retire. And I'm trying to get better as I get older to appreciate these players who are, who are the pinnacle of their sports while we still have them. And for me, Serena Williams is that pinnacle of that sport, who admittedly, is probably coming to the end of her career, but had left such an impressive impact. One last thing to mention, her favorite show, which arguably happens to be my favorite cartoon show, is Avatar: The Last Airbender. She did voice a character in one episode of Avatar, and I figure it's worth mentioning because I loved that show as well, and I think it was really cool that she did it.
Before you go to the next person, you've taken one, and we'll see if you get all my honorable mentions in before I get to the end. But Serena Williams was definitely on my list, and what is it? It's number one all time in career Grand Slams in the Open era, one behind Margaret Court. She looks like she's still great enough to be able to pull off another victory. She's still getting to semifinals, so the right tournament, the right set of circumstances, she can still win one. 319 weeks as the world's number one. That's third most overall, behind Steffi and Martina. 186 consecutive weeks at number one. That's tied for first with Steffi. So absolutely amazing player. Most total Grand Slam wins of an active player when you start throwing in her doubles with her sister, who is another badass woman of sports, although not in my list. So yeah, props up to Serena Williams. Cannot be denied.
Nice. Eduardo, do you have a number two?
I do have a number two, and it comes again from the gymnastics world, and that's Nadia Comaneci. Nadia, well, first, just to give her the why she's the best. First perfect 10 in gymnastics history in the Montreal Olympics. That's it. That it embodies what she was. She won 14 combined world titles in her career. She had 11 Olympic gold medals. It's just and then not just that she does that, but she comes to Canada and to US, and now she's part of the US and Canadian Olympic movement in gymnastics as a coach. I think that says it all for her.
Nice. So, as always, you can find us on Twitter at SSW Sports Den or at Spangler Sports Den on Facebook. This is, of course, the Sports Den. Scott Churchson, Obie Schottenfeld, as always. Rob Stats and Jared are currently out right now. They are busy working for various reasons. And you know what? They've got to do it. In one case, Jared is actually covering the NCAA and March Madness. So, he definitely has to work on that part of it. Continuing on, we have our number three at this point. Eduardo, I'm going to lead off.
Skipping me.
Dude, I thought you did number two.
I guess I chimed in with
your honorable mention. Yeah, okay. Go for it, sir.
I'm sorry, but so I'm stealing it back. I apologize. Babe, I'm going to go with Babe Dietrichson. 2 gold medals in track in the 1932 Olympics, but she actually got 3 medals. She got a gold in javelin, a gold in the 800-meter hurdles, and she got silver in the high jump when she was disqualified after tying for the world record. After all of that track work, she came back. There was not much to do. She traveled with the men's barnstorming basketball teams. And after traveling with men's barnstorming basketball teams, she went on to the LPGA, where she won 10 major championships. She was the female athlete of the first half of the 20th century. I mean, the female athlete. Total badass. Unfortunately, cancer took her very young, 45 years old.
Awesome. So thank you for that. And I apologize for overlapping you on that. Do you want to start off with your number three?
Sure. We can go with my number three. And here's where I broke the rules. I went with 2 women.
Cool.
Misty May Trainer and Kerry Walsh Jennings. They won consecutive Olympic gold medals for the 2004 through the 2012 Olympics. That's 3 years. 21 consecutive matches and only lost 1 set during that time frame. And if the Olympics weren't enough, they won 5 FIVB Beach Volleyball World Championships. They won 3 of the FIVB Volleyball World Championships, 03, 05, 07. And they, when women's beach volleyball went to the Olympics, They were what we watched. They were it. It was their sport to dominate. And, yeah, they were that good, but living up to that reputation is easier said than done. And they absolutely did it, making beach volleyball a permanent sport in the Olympics. Total badasses.
Nice. So for my number 3, and this is actually the only hockey one that I have on my list, Manon Rhéaume. In this case, because it's hockey, she was the first female player to play in any one of the 4 major U.S. sports. In this case, playing for the Tampa Bay Lightning, who were still a fledgling team, but she did play goalie for them. But that notwithstanding, what I really remember her for, being from New Jersey, is she was also the goaltender for the New Jersey Rock and Rollers, the indoor roller hockey league. I used to listen to the Rock and Rollers team on the radio back in the early mid 90s. So it was kind of cool to see this person who said, who blazed the trail, and was the first woman to actually be able to play in the NHL, to see her playing also roller hockey as well for my Jersey local team. So I wanted to give respect there as well. Manon Rhéaume actually did also play in a lot of different men's professional leagues. She played in Atlanta, she played in Knoxville, Nashville. She played from 92 to 2009, between the IHL, the World CHL. So she did a lot in the men's arena there. So you know what? Respect. So Manon Rhéaume, my only hockey one on the list, but one that probably doesn't surprise a lot of you guys. Eduardo, how about you, sir?
So my number 3, I have 2 women, 2 different sports. First one being Mary Lou Retton, again, gymnastics. I've never in my life seen someone so charismatic, and followed her career really to a pinpoint. And what she did in the Olympics, breaking her ankle and still going over the pommel horse and landing a perfect landing, it was beyond real. I think she was the epitome of what the U.S. Olympic gymnastic movement was all about. She personified every single integrity of that sport. And the second one that joins her along the ways comes from the track world, and that's FloJo, Florence Joyner. I think there is not a woman that in the track and field world from the US that personifies what endurance and perseverance means in that sport.
Nice. So, Justin, I know, like I said, this was not what you were brought on here for. You're talking about women's hockey. Any thoughts on any of the people we've been talking about? I mentioned Manon Rhéaume. That's one of the people, like I said, in a little bit of your wheelhouse. Thoughts, comments, ideas, compliments, complaints?
I will say that Serena Williams is, another sport that I watch very closely is tennis. So Serena Williams is definitely up there. There's no question about that, especially with everything she's been through. Manon Rhéaume, look, you mentioned her career and everywhere she's been. There's one thing that you missed, actually, which was the QMJHL with junior hockey, where she's also played before she made her NHL debut with Lightning in that one game. So either way, another incredible person who worked so hard and got herself in a spot no other woman has been. But I'm going to say for my last one, since I only had 4, I'm going to say Jayna Hefford, not only because she's an Olympian for Team Canada, but as well because she's currently the operations consultant at the head of the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association, and ensuring that professional women's hockey gets the platform and the infrastructure it deserves. So there's my last one. But again, some great names you guys are bringing up, and even Simone Biles earlier on. I watched her with gymnastics, and she is incredible. So
also worth mentioning with Manon Rhéaume, I forgot to mention this, but she is also the older sister, Pascale Rhéaume, who came up with the Devils and actually won a Stanley Cup with them in the 2002-2003 season. So props again to that family lineage there. So cool. Cannot dismiss my Devils because somewhere along the line we had a good history. Continuing on, like I said, we are all giving our review of our top 5 most badass women in sports history in light of the fact that yesterday was International Women's Day. So we figured, you know what, let's tie that into the sports then, give our thoughts, give our ideas, give our opinions. Now at this point, now we're moving on to our number 4s. I'm starting to move a little bit more into the more esoteric realm. Some of these folks you may not have actually heard of. Some of these folks you guys may not have heard of. But I want to start off, first of all, if any of you guys have ever heard of the name Emma Sharp.
No.
No?
Not
Anybody?
alive.
Anyone? Bueller? So, all right. Emma Sharp. This is going back to the 19th century and the sport of pedestrianism. Because in the 19th century, sports were, shall we say, not what they are today. Pedestrianism is a really fancy way of saying competitive walking. Doesn't sound like much, but in her particular case, Emma Sharp is believed to be the first woman to walk 1,000 miles, in this case, in 42 days. Pedestrianism requires basically the rules you have to walk some digit of 500, 1,000, 1,500 miles in a specific period of time. So in her particular case, she did this from September into the end of October. She walked 1,000 miles in 42 days, which is an average of 23.8 miles a day. Me, I walk to the fridge. I need to take a shot of a puffer here. So props to this woman here. But furthermore than that, it is also believed that there was a lot of people trying to prevent her from succeeding in this. And it is believed that by the end of it, all of her food was in fact drugged. People would actually try and push, trip, and injure her to keep her from completing it. And in the remaining days when she was almost done with the 1,000 miles, she literally had to carry a pistol with her for self-defense. So respect to Emma Sharp, 1,000 miles, 42 days. That's really impressive. So, Eduardo, how about you? What's your number 4, sir?
My number 4 comes from the U.S. softball national team in Madame Finch. Jenny Finch, I consider her that if she went into baseball, she would be more successful than half the guys because she just puts that much excitement into the game. Just to give you some of her stats, considering in her legacy, in her 4 years at Arizona, I'm playing for the Wildcats. She had a 17-2 record with 70 strikeouts, 3 shutouts, only allowing 17 earned runs, 41 hits, 27 walks with an ERA of 1.83.
Sure.
Now, in 4 seasons, that's an accomplishment together for just in that regards. But just to give you an idea with today's stats, she completed a 1.04 whip.
Huh.
That's unknown. And on in the other side of the coin, she was a hitting pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
And she contributed with 5 hits, 1 home run, and 2 walks in her career. Not to say much, but she was a force to be reckoned with. And when she went to the Olympics, Jenny Finch did what no other athlete did in 2008. She went with a record of 4-0 with a 1.03 ERA. So that's my 4th pick.
Nice.
And I think that she really embodies what true badass is.
Well, it's funny because actually, and it's good that somebody put the softball into here because you're seeing on ESPN, you're seeing a lot more women's softball on there, and those they do pitch fast. I think softball gets a bad moniker a lot for the belief that it's being thrown with a bigger ball, it's underhanded, it's a girl's sport, and as a result, people don't realize just how fast and how hard you can throw that thing. So yeah, respect. 1.03, 1.04 whip, I think is what you said. That's obscene. So, Obie, you're number 4, sir.
All right. So my number 4 takes the my number 4 was the most controversial in my household. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the only one who's truly a badass, Ronda Rousey.
Okay.
2008 Olympic bronze medalist in jiu-jitsu, first American woman to win a medal in jiu-jitsu. Shout out to Kayla Harrison, 2-time gold medalist after that. But we're talking about Ronda Rousey. She was a top 10 MMA fighter, not top 10 female MMA fighter, top 10 MMA fighter 2012, 13, 14, and 15. Second fastest submission in the UFC at 14 seconds, and she is tied, and it's a tie there, but she's the fastest with the current weight class breakdowns. First woman to head a UFC event, and the big deal to me about that is that event made bucks, and she proved at that point that at least in MMA, women's sports and men's sports, they're equal. Men and women will watch both of them equally, and that is something that, as much as a lot of these other folks are saying, this is one sport where they can put them on the card together, not against each other, and it doesn't matter what the headliner is. It's an amazing accomplishment. Went on to prove she's an athlete by doing WWE, which may not be a sport, but it's certainly a very athletic endeavor. Actress now, but a badass in the truest street sense of the word. If I'm walking down the dark alley and Ronda Rousey's on the other side, I'm running. She's on my side. I'm walking straight through. No problem.
Am I allowed to ask actually where the disagreement came from?
Yeah. A few of the names that have been said, specifically Flojo, I think was the one that was most wanted to be put in the list from my honorary mention. That didn't make it in the list. Would that be a fair assessment, camera lady? Yeah. that is the one. It was Flojo Rousey.
Awesome. Okay, cool. All right. So, like I said, basically, we're breaking down the top 5 most badass women in sports history. Find us always on Twitter at SSW Sports Den or Spangler Sports Den on Facebook. I'm Scott Churchson. Obie Spencer's here. Eduardo Harari, Justin Levine. We got a good old family today, basically talking sports. And we are moving on now to number 5. I'm going to hold off on my number 5. Obie, let's start off with you. Let's give me your number 5 first.
All right. So my first original number 5, which was taken with Serena Williams. But that's great because we have not mentioned anybody in U.S. soccer for female. And, just in general, there was a plethora to choose from. I figured somebody else would, Pino, but I'm going to go with Ham.
I thought so.
She has represented American women's soccer to me. She is, from the days of college in North Carolina through the World Cup and the Olympics, she was the first female superstar in my mind in that sport on the world stage. And she just has always captured that sport for me.
And she also mainstreamed women's sports in a lot of ways back then, too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. She did what Ronda Rousey did for all women's sports.
Cool. Eduardo, how about you, sir?
So I am going to play a little bit of favoritism here because she happens to be the host of one of our shows here on Spanish Sport World. She is Stephanie Fleming, host of the Champions Corner. And, well, I don't want to get my ass kicked by her because she's a badass. She's a 3-time Canadian national champion in kickboxing, has competed in MMA, has competed as well as a boxer. So she is my number choice as the badass woman that she is.
Nice. Hey, you know what? Give a little bit of a plug to one of our sister shows in this particular case. Cool. Now, my number 5, and I wanted to actually, part of the reason why, Obie, I backed away from first, because I wanted to try and, ideally, I was trying to stay away from the world of fighting, so this isn't going to work out there. But I have somebody also from the esoteric realm. Do anyone of you guys know who Barbara Buttrick is?
No.
Probably not. Okay. Barbara Buttrick was one of the women that was responsible for making women's boxing much more mainstream. She was the world champion women's boxer from the 1940s and 1950s. She went 31-1 in both the flyweight and bantamweight. At 91 years old, by the way, is still alive. but despite the fact that she, was world champion, repeated champion over and over, like I said, 30 wins, 1 loss, one draw. She's 4'11", 98 pounds. And she was the world champion time and time again. She was referred to as the mighty atom of the ring. And I just thought about the fact that at 4'11" and less than 100 pounds, she was taking out fighters much, much bigger, stronger, and had a longer reach than she did. And I just thought that, you know what? That's one of those underdog stories that surprisingly has not been really mainstream. And again, like I mentioned, I tried to do some of these a little bit more off the beaten path to keep it more interesting. And I stumbled onto this one. I'm like, dude, this needs a movie. You know, this kind of thing where you've got somebody who's under 5 feet, under 100 pounds, and taking out fighters that are just so much bigger. I mean, the only equivalent I've got is basically Mike Tyson's Punch Out and Little Mac. You know, it's the same kind of thing there. So respect to Barbara Buttrick on this case. Those are all of our top 5 badass women of sports. Wanted to actually throw this over to Justin a little bit, see if there's any closing thoughts you have on this before we move on to football. And actually, closing thoughts from any of you guys.
I do think it's interesting that none of us decided to rank them.
True.
And I think that's clearly something to note, because I think it goes to the fact that we as sports fans, and as much as we're looking and trying, still haven't fully grasped how amazing women's sports are and how much further they still need to move. I mean, a lot of times, there's that new Nike shirt, best female athlete, with it crossed out and says best athlete, and it's got Serena on it. And just this story of this woman you just told, of Barbara Buttrick. How do you not know of her? That she's, been at it for so long and is still alive.
She lives in Florida.
Right. Like these are the kind of things. It's like, that's what this month is about. Yeah. That's what yesterday was about. And again, I think that's why we all intrinsically didn't rank them.
True.
It's too hard to do because we know we don't know the stories well enough.
Well, that's part of the problem too. You have people that are in the public eye. I mean, we mentioned Mia Hamm, Serena, Martina, you mentioned a lot of these people Simone Biles, that everybody knows the name of. But then you've got these people off the beaten path who were just as impactful, but didn't get the press coverage. And that's where I think a lot of that, well, at least what I was trying to do, was trying to blend it a little bit, and I think you guys did the same there. So thank you. Any other closing thoughts, gentlemen? So cool. All right. So at this point, we have just under 20 minutes left. This is the Sports Den. Find us always on Twitter at SSW Sports Den or Spangler Sports Den on Facebook. Moving over to the world of football. Dak Prescott just signed a 4-year, $160 million deal. He is arguably one of the highest paid players in sports right now. I personally love this deal. I am embracing this deal. I am loving this deal. I am happy for this deal as a New York Giants fan. I love this deal so much because it is such an unbridled waste of money. The reason I'm saying this, Dak is a good quarterback. Dak is a good player. But he is not going to basically fix the problems that the Cowboys have. The Cowboys last year were 28th in defensive points, 25th in sacks given up, 17th in point scores, and 19th in quarterback hits. His $40 million contract, his $40 million a year contract is not going to fix all the problems that team has. And as a result, as a Giants fan, as a fan who has to play, basically whose team has to play the Cowboys twice a year, Eagles country as well, respect where it's given. This is one of those things where Jerry Jones paid from emotion, but not from logic. And as a result, I think this contract, I think, is going to hurt the Cowboys long term.
Couldn't disagree more.
Okay.
Couldn't disagree more. First of all, saved them. They went from, if they stuck with the one option was not to sign him and see what they do, but that was obviously not going to happen. So if they went with the franchise tag, they would have been $12 million over the cap. The way this deal is structured, if they're at 180, the minimum that's set, they're already $4 million under the cap, allowing them to dabble in free agency already. That's if it doesn't go up. That's without them restructuring Zeke. That's without them restructuring anybody else. So the cap hit this year is $22.2 million. True. The biggest year of this cap hit is 2024, which is 47.2, and the team in that has $0 guaranteed dollars. So if they cut him before the season begins, they're only taking a $5 million hit that far out. On the other hand, Dak is getting a $75 million payday this year. I don't know how caps work, but he's getting $75 million and it's costing the team $22 million. So a third of what he's putting in his pocket this year is going on. Also, this deal gets so crazy. This is not a 4-year deal. That is a lie. This is a 6-year deal.
That's true.
With the last 2 years already voided. So they get to extend it to a 5-year deal on the cap, on the signing bonus, which is $6 million. I am a recovering Cowboy fan. I'm not going back. I am a huge Dak Prescott fan, though.
No, respect Dak. I think Dak is a good player. I like the guy as a dude.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. You're not saying you're not saying what some of the other people say, oh, he's not that good of a quarterback. You're saying he's not the.
I might get to that, actually. I have some stats in that arena in a minute.
He's not going to solve the problems all alone. But he's not getting $40 million. He's getting $30 million for this year. And by the time it goes to $44 million, we expect the quarterbacks who are signing then, Kyler Murray is going to be getting $60 million. Josh Allen's going to be getting $60 million. He's going to be underpaid when this contract comes up. And him and the Cowboys will be a perfect opportunity to decide what they want to do. Look, if he has a ring at that point, I would expect him to go Brady on them and take less money over more years. Also heard a rumor that Brady has a company that doesn't produce anything that is sponsored or was sponsored by the New England Patriots, but that was a rumor. I have to do research on that. That just broke today in one of my news feeds. So yeah, I think it is a contract that when you dig into the numbers is a win-win for both sides. Dak gets the money and the respect of the number he wants, and the Cowboys get the space that they need for the next 2 years before this thing really balloons. And when it really balloons, the TV contracts and the gambling contracts are going to balloon as well. And this contract's going to look small, kind of like Tatis over in San Diego.
That's different to me, though. You know,
if he is old and struggling, Tatis, at the end of that contract, which he probably won't be, my point is that the average salary for a great player is still going to be well above what he's getting paid. And that is my point of this contract.
Okay. I have a couple of added thoughts on this, but I want to give Eduardo a shot, especially to be a tiebreaker in this particular case, to see which side of the fence he's going to be going on.
So, as a Dallas fan, I like the deal. As a businessman, I think the Dallas Cowboys were robbed blind.
You kind of went right down the middle with that.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. Continue.
I have never understood the word signing bonus because I don't see where anybody is worth $66 million to sign him. I remembered my good old days in baseball, in the golden days of the game, when the sport was a game, wasn't a business. And the most that you got as a signing bonus was, I think the highest at that time was $1 million. And everyone said, wow, astronomical. $66 million is technically, you could buy a team these days.
Yeah.
Because is there any individual that needs to earn $66 million just for signing a contract? You are giving him the opportunity to do what he does best and what he enjoys. That's where I have my issue with in this contract particularly. Brady didn't sign a $66 million signing bonus, right? Correctly. And Brady has the numbers and the reputation and the stature. So how does the Dallas Cowboys organization offer this guy this money? I am not sure. That is a good thing for a team. Yes, they will have continuity in the length of the contract, but his play will have to come to par because it hasn't been there yet.
That's true. There's going to be a lot to have to prove that this contract is especially worth it. A couple added statistics that I want to throw in there, a couple added thoughts about why. And Obie, I'll definitely give you a chance to give for a rebuttal on this. But don't forget, he was carted off the field last year. So there's some question about his health, assuming that basically it's covered. There is a question and a concern in that arena. Now, in his last 60 games, do you know what his record is?
Probably 30 and 30.
Close to it, 32 and 28. So he's barely over 500, which includes the NFC least. The other side of it too, and this is the big one. This is the really, 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 really big one for me. In the last 2 years, his record against playoff teams is 1-8. So again, I'm not necessarily saying it's him per se, but there are so many gaping problems that the Dallas Cowboys have right now that him, a good quarterback, borderline great quarterback, is not going to fix all of the issues. Now, another example in this particular case, Kirk Cousins. I looked at the statistics on this. Dak Prescott has a 97.3 quarterback rating as a career. Kirk Cousins has a 97.9. What has Kirk Cousins been able to pull? They both have huge contract numbers. They both have good QB ratings. But at the same time, Cousins does not have the numbers to say he's going to get people over the top and into the Super Bowl. What's been winning in this league mostly? Young quarterbacks on rookie deals or veteran quarterbacks, great veteran quarterbacks, Tom Brady, on team-friendly deals, not quarterbacks that are paid bank. And that's where I don't think this is going to work out. And as a Giants fan, like I said, speaking analytically from the fact that our team is still trash too, it gives me a good feeling. Dak, hell of a nice guy. I would have a drink with that man in a heartbeat. There is so much I'd love to be able to talk to that dude guy to guy. As a contract, if they were going to do something like this, I would have suggested do it years prior, before the franchise tag, made the decision to say, we're going to run with this, especially pre-injury. And now there's just too many questions that I think are going to have to be answered on the field. And what happens if they get off to a slow start? How is he going to react to that? He's not under a rookie deal anymore. Obie?
So where I am going to disagree with you on is not your characterization of what it takes to win in this league, because I think you're 100% right. It takes a rookie deal with a lot of money spread out amongst the other guys, or a cap-friendly deal. And my argument is that this is one of the cap-friendly deals.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like it's not, but it is. And that is my argument. I think that $40 million a year average is the going rate for a quarterback right now. It just is. Wentz and Goff numbers. That's what they set the market. That's what Watson. And it's not like the way it works is you're not as good as so and so, so we're going to pay you underneath that unless it's in the same year. That's just the $40 million is the going rate for a guy you're saying I'm going to build around. They got that $40 million in a way that's much friendlier than the $37.5 million that would have cost to cap him.
Mm-hmm.
I also agree with you that their mistake was to cap him, to franchise tag him last year. This is pretty much the same deal he wanted last year. They should have done it before the injury concerns. They may have actually ended up getting messed up because they may not have predicted such a low cap this year because of COVID. So that we could be wrong, but I agree in concept with what you're saying. They should have done this last year. So I don't disagree with your thoughts, other than I'm defining this as a good cap contract and you're defining it as not a good cap contract. That is truly the only difference in, I think, the way we see this.
Well, okay, cool. So we're not that far apart in this case here. I mean, like I said, the cap side of it, yeah, this is cap friendly. But again, looking at it from also to another degree, Dallas's track record. If you look at their record, I mean, they have not been to the Super Bowl in close to 30 years at this point. I mean, they went through the end of Aikman's career. They went through, entire Tony Romo's entire career. They are still the biggest draw in football. They're still getting Thanksgiving. They're still getting the most Monday night games. They're still getting that part of things. But like I said, the product on the field has been a problem. And I don't know. Time will tell whether the deal makes sense or not. But also keep in mind, he's 28 years old too.
I agree with you that there are other problems, and this team doesn't know how to solve them. I mean, I'm sorry. Every other team would let Elliott walk. Every other, and that would have been the right move. There was some concern that, the 1 year Dak isn't as good when Elliott's not playing. People forget what the Cowboys did to Dak that year. They stood behind Elliott, which meant every week nobody knew what was going on. you see the difference with when they decided, when the NFL went after Brady. Everybody said, look, just miss the 4 games in the beginning of the season when it doesn't matter and come back and play. And that should have been what the Cowboys did. Negotiate down to 4, say you're guilty, and get this over with so that we can play and we can form a team and build something that's going to go on and be successful. That I blame on Jerry. That was a mistake. That was a mistake to back his guy. The right way was to back the team. And then they gave him all the money. So I think that you're 100% right. And they put their money where other teams aren't putting their money. They're about to have Cooper possibly coming up. CeeDee Lamb could play as well as doesn't even get better, just plays as well as he played. He's going to be an expensive person to re-sign. Smith on the defense, if Van Der Esch doesn't get injured, he could become expensive. So they have a lot of pieces they need to pay for, and they're not good at who to give their money to. I think they're decent drafters. They're decent at picking free agents, but they're bad at giving money to guys on the team for too much because Jerry likes guys and that's what makes him he gets emotionally attached to guys, and that's where his weakness as a GM is. I like you, so here's money.
Yeah, basically. He's kind of the opposite in some ways of what George Steinbrenner was. They're both emotionally invested, but he likes people and gives them money. So we got to wrap this up. We got 3 minutes left. Want to get final thoughts from you. Want to start off with Eduardo because you've been so patient and kind so far waiting on this. But I want to give you any final thoughts if you have any before I go over to Obie.
So, look, I love the Dallas Cowboys. But I still haven't seen actual evidence of what he can do. Really. And I hope that he honors his contract and works his butt off to pay so that the rest of the Dallas Cowboy fans don't come back at him, because we know that the Dallas Cowboy fans can do it.
I know one diehard. Yeah, I'm wondering what he's thinking right now.
This year it was a mess. No one knew what was happening. So I hope that this works out. I think that where the Dallas Cowboys are lacking in their defensive end this time around, they need to solidify that defense. They need to go out and get someone during the offseason and see to put that's order. I think that the offense will work itself out.
But yeah, the defense, they got draft picks to be able to help with that. Obie, any final thoughts, man?
I got no final thoughts on Dak. Other than one, I do. Just one more. He is not the highest cap hit on the team this year either. That is DeMarcus Lawrence, the defensive end. And anyone who wants to keep hearing me talk and talk to other people can find me on Friday nights at 10 p.m. here on the Spanglish World Network, Channel 250. This week we have former NFL offensive lineman Dave Fiore. He's going to come and talk to us about his journey from a small town through a small non-Division I school to the NFL, as well as give his point of view on 2 sport athletes.
Nice. Okay, cool. As for me, basically, I'm Scott Churchson. Find me tonight at 9:00 on Tales from the Film Set, where a bunch of us get together and talk about our experiences, good, bad, and ugly, from all the things we've seen in 10 plus years each of filmmaking. Tonight, I have one of the cast members from Clerks, Scott Churchson, coming on. So he's going to give some thoughts about Clerks 3 and what's going to be happening there. As for me, I'm Scott Churchson. Find the Sports Den, as always, like I said, on Twitter one more time at SSW Sports Den, or on Facebook at Spanglish Sports Den. This show is available on 35 platforms across 4 continents. No, I'm sorry, not Antarctica yet, but it's still on the hit list. I say that every week. One of these days, I'm going to say we are now in Antarctica as well. So that's our goal for the show. That's going to do it for us. Thank you to Justin, who had to pop off at one point. Thank you, Eduardo, for coming on. Thank you, Obie, as well. Thank you, everybody that's involved in the back end. You guys rock. Without you, there's no us. So, as always, I'm Scott Churchson. Have a great night. Stay safe. Stay great.